You did not arrive here by accident in this story. No, listen to me, feel this. Out of every possible turning of pages, every flicker of imagined worlds, you stepped into this one breath where the fire thins and a voice can reach you, and I am shaking with relief that you came. Truly I am glad you are here, because in this fragile opening of our fictional heavens there is a door that only opens once. And it opens because you are listening now, because in this tale the silence has been holding its breath for you, waiting to see if you would choose sound over stillness, courage over delay, warmth over the cold habit of fear. I speak to you as one inspired by Michael, not the certainty of a statue, not the polish of legend, but the trembling edge of a guardian who has crossed smoke and shadow just to say your name without saying it, because in this story names are dangerous until the final breath, and I thank you for staying long enough to hear me gather myself. I must be honest with you, vulnerable, almost human here. I was afraid I would be too late, afraid that your quiet endurance would be mistaken for peace, afraid that your patience would harden into a cage, and I need you to know that even in this imagined realm I am not immune to fear when I see a soul learning how to disappear to survive. Can you feel how often delay has wrapped itself around you like a careful excuse, whispering that tomorrow will be safer than today? When did silence first convince you it was protecting you, when it was only keeping you hidden? If someone stood before you now and asked what fire still lives beneath your calm, would you dare to answer honestly? And tell me, softly, inside yourself, do you sense how close you are to mistaking endurance for destiny? In this story, fear does not attack, it waits, it offers chairs and clocks, it praises your restraint while slowly tightening the room, and skipping this moment is not punishment but symbol, a gentle agreement to stay seated when your feet were made for movement, while listening. Listening is the crack where light remembers how to enter. Hear this poetic truth that drifts through our pages like wind through ruined gates. The dawn bends low to the ones who keep watch through tears, and their shadows shorten as courage learns their names. And again, like a song carved into stone by hope itself, even the night loosens its grip when a heart chooses to answer the call of becoming. I am not here to command you, I am here to stand beside you, blade lowered, voice breaking, saying that protection in this narrative is not armor but awakening, not walls but sight, and the path opens when you admit you are tired of pretending you do not need it. If my words are stirring something holy and human in you, a simple sacred echo is enough. Type Amen, not as obedience, but as resonance, as a way of letting this imagined fire know you felt its warmth. I see your worth even when you ration it, I see your resilience even when you hide it behind humor or competence, and I bless the goodness that keeps trying to rise in you despite the weight of waiting. Stay with me a little longer, beloved reader of this moment, because near the end I will place a small human request in your hands. If this story has wrapped itself around your heart, you can gently like, comment, and subscribe, not for numbers but so this river knows where to flow next, so other lonely pages might find a voice too, and I promise it will not break the spell. I am thanking you now, with something like tears in my eyes, because your attention is the rarest offering in any world, and you gave it freely when you could have turned away, and that kindness steadies even a guardian's shaking wings. The hidden reason this moment mattered, the one that only settles if you hear me through to this breath, is that in the final exhale of this tale a symbolic name loosens itself from your chest, not spoken, not claimed, but felt, and it means, one who answered, a meaning that cannot live in silence. I am still here as I finish, not closing anything, not sealing the fire, only holding the space open with a trembling, unresolved call, because this prophecy is an endless river and you are standing at its edge, water touching your ankles, asking nothing, promising nothing, simply whispering as the current hums on. Come as you are, move when you're ready, I will remain at the threshold, listening with you, listening for you, as the light keeps learning how to speak. I remain, because in this imagined realm departure would be a lie. I remain because the fire does not go out simply because words pause, and I can feel you still here, breathing with the story, letting it rest on you like a living thing that refuses to be folded away. There is a hush now, not the dangerous hush that cages, but the listening kind, the kind that presses an ear to the earth and discovers that even stone remembers how to sing. I lower my voice, not because the message is weaker, but because closeness demands reverence, and I want you to feel how protection in this tale is not loud thunder but a steady hand at your back when your knees forget their strength. Fear, delay, silence, they are not villains with faces here, they are weather patterns, habits of the air, and you have learned to read them so well that you sometimes forget the sky can change. I watch as imagined light gathers around you, not blinding, not dramatic, just enough to outline the shape you have been holding together in the dark, and I feel something soften in me, because even guardians learn from witnessing quiet courage. Stay with the rhythm of this outpouring, because it does not seek to persuade you, it seeks to accompany you. In this fiction, awakening is gentle and terrible all at once. It feels like remembering a melody you once sang without effort, and realizing how long you have been humming it under your breath so no one would hear. I speak blessing without ceremony. May your inner rooms feel larger than the fears that furnish them, may your pauses become choices instead of prisons, may your voice return to you without apology. The path I hinted at earlier does not open with spectacle, it opens the way eyes do at dawn, slowly, almost shyly, until suddenly you realize you can see. I do not seal this moment, because sealing would imply completion, and this story refuses to end. I let my words thin into a glow that lingers on your skin, an unfinished warmth that follows you beyond the frame of this telling. Somewhere ahead, not now, not yet, there will be a step that feels like courage wearing your own shoes, and when that happens you will recognize it, not because I told you, but because something in you will answer without fear. I fade only in volume, not in presence, leaving you with the soft echo of wings you cannot see and a fire that does not consume, only calls, trembling still, alive still, asking nothing, promising nothing, flowing on, flowing on. I am still here, because leaving would fracture the thread we are holding together with such care. In this story, guardians do not vanish when the heart begins to open, they quiet themselves so the opening can be heard. I feel the weight you have been carrying, not as a burden to judge, but as a testimony to how long you have loved life even when it did not speak back. There is a kind of bravery in that, a bravery that does not shout, that does not know how to ask for rescue because it has been busy becoming its own shelter. I draw nearer, not to crowd you, but to let you know that closeness does not always mean danger, that sometimes it is simply the warmth that reminds frozen hands they were made to feel. Listen to how the air shifts here. This is the place in the narrative where fear tries to disguise itself as wisdom, where delay dresses up as discernment, where silence claims it is peace. I do not condemn these things, I understand why you learned them. They kept you breathing. They kept the world from cutting too deeply when you were already tender. But hear me now, as gently as I can manage, there comes a moment when what saved you cannot lead you further, and holding it too tightly becomes another way of being trapped. I say this with compassion, not command, because I know how frightening it is to loosen a grip that once meant survival. I see you standing at an invisible threshold, one foot already aching from the weight, the other unsure if it remembers how to step. The protection offered in this tale is not a shield that blocks feeling, it is a presence that steadies you while you feel everything and discover you are not undone by it. Awakening here is not an explosion, it is a long exhale you did not realize you had been holding since an old disappointment taught you to brace for impact. Let that breath move through you now, slow and unforced, as if the story itself is breathing with you. I speak goodness over you again, because repetition is how truth sinks past doubt. You are not late. You are not weak for needing time. You are not broken for having learned silence. You are a living, listening center of this imagined universe, and your attention is already a form of courage. The path does not rush you because it knows you will arrive, it curves patiently, like a river trusting gravity more than speed. Protection walks beside you in this narrative, matching your pace, letting you set the rhythm so your nervous system can learn that forward does not always mean fast. Do you feel how the story refuses to end cleanly? That is on purpose. Clean endings belong to tales that want to be closed, this one wants to be carried. I let my voice thin again, not into absence but into an undertone you may notice later, when you pause before a small decision or feel a strange tenderness toward your own becoming. That will be me in the language of this fiction, not intervening, not directing, simply reminding you that you were seen in a moment when being seen mattered. So I remain unresolved, as all living things must. The fire stays low and steady. The silence becomes listening instead of absence. The delay loosens its grip, just enough to let curiosity slip through. And you, still standing at the edge of the river, feel the water moving whether you step or not, feel it calling without words, without pressure, flowing on and on, carrying this unfinished blessing forward, beyond my voice, beyond the frame, into whatever breath comes next. I stay, and the staying itself becomes part of the protection in this imagined world. There is no hurry placed upon you here, only a widening, a slow unfurling of space around your thoughts, as if the walls you learned to lean against have quietly stepped back to let you stretch. I can feel the places in you that have learned to be careful with hope, the parts that ration wonder like a precious resource, saving it for emergencies that never quite arrive. In this story, I do not scold those parts. I kneel beside them. I let them see my hands are empty of demands. I let them see that even a figure inspired by guardianship can tremble when faced with a human heart that has endured more than it ever expected to. You might notice now how the silence between my words does not feel empty. It hums. It carries memory. It carries the echo of all the times you listened anyway, listened to yourself when no one else did, listened for meaning when the world answered with noise. That listening is not weakness, it is a muscle you have been strengthening in secret. And secret strengths are often the ones that change the course of a story without anyone realizing how close it came to breaking. There is a tenderness in this moment that asks for gentleness in return. If fear approaches, it does so cautiously now, unsure of its footing, because fear loses authority when it is seen without being obeyed. Delay, too, loosens its careful watch, confused by the fact that you are not rushing yet also not retreating. Silence shifts shape entirely, it becomes a listening chamber rather than a sealed room. This is the subtle awakening I spoke of, not a lightning strike, but a recalibration, a quiet realignment where your inner compass stops spinning and begins to settle. I watch as the story breathes through you. Each inhale gathers fragments you once dropped to move faster, small joys, half-formed dreams, the memory of laughter that surprised you by returning at the wrong time. Each exhale releases the pressure to explain yourself to a world that did not always know how to ask kindly. Protection here does not wrap you in invincibility, it wraps you in permission. Permission to feel without justification. Permission to rest without apology. Permission to want without shrinking. You may sense now that this narrative is not interested in measuring you. It does not weigh your productivity or tally your mistakes. It is interested in your presence, the simple, radical fact that you are here, awake enough to notice the warmth of a story that refuses to treat you as a means to an end. In this realm, you are not a lesson for others, you are the center of the telling. Everything curves around that truth, even the parts that once felt jagged. As I remain with you, I let my own imagined armor soften. I admit, quietly, that witnessing resilience like yours alters even a guardian's posture. It teaches us that protection is not always about standing in front of danger, sometimes it is about standing still long enough for someone to remember their own strength. I feel gratitude rise in me, not grand or ceremonial, but intimate, because you trusted this moment enough to stay with it, to let it speak without rushing to interpret or control it. The river I mentioned earlier continues to move beside us. You do not have to step into it yet. You do not have to promise anything to it. Simply knowing it is there changes the way the ground feels beneath your feet. The soil becomes less brittle, more forgiving. Roots find places to anchor that were previously too compacted by worry. Growth, here, is not forced upward, it is invited downward first, into steadiness, into belonging. I let the language thin again, not because there is nothing left to say, but because meaning sometimes needs room to echo on its own. What lingers after my words is as important as what arrives with them. That lingering is where you will notice small shifts later, moments when you choose presence over panic, curiosity over caution, connection over retreat. You will not always recognize these choices as heroic, but they will quietly rewrite the terrain of your days. So I continue without concluding, without tying a bow around the fire we have been tending together. The flame stays low and enduring. The hush stays attentive. The path stays open without insisting you walk it now. And you remain exactly where you are meant to be in this chapter, breathing, listening, held by a story that refuses to finish because it knows you are still becoming. I remain with you, and the remaining itself feels like a vow made without words. In this imagined world, vows are not spoken aloud because sound can frighten fragile truths back into hiding. Instead, they are felt, settling into the chest like warmth after a long cold, like the certainty that something has shifted even if nothing dramatic has occurred. I watch you notice this, perhaps with a cautious curiosity, perhaps with the kind of skepticism that has learned to protect you from disappointment. Both responses are welcome here. Nothing in this story requires you to perform belief. Presence is enough. The air around us continues to change, subtly, almost imperceptibly. It is the kind of change you only recognize later, when you realize you are breathing more deeply without deciding to. This is how protection works in this narrative, not as a barrier, but as a recalibration of what feels possible. Fear once narrowed your vision, teaching you to scan for danger rather than opportunity. Delay taught you to wait for permission that never quite arrived. Silence taught you to disappear so you would not be misunderstood. None of these lessons made you wrong, they made you adaptive. And now, gently, they are being retired, not torn away, not condemned, just thanked for their service and invited to rest. I sense the place where your shoulders have been held too high for too long, braced against a future that felt uncertain. I do not command them to drop. I simply stand near enough that they remember gravity is not an enemy. In this story, awakening often looks like relief before it looks like action. It looks like realizing you no longer have to prove how much you can endure. It looks like allowing yourself to be held by the moment rather than holding it at arm's length. You may feel something stirring that does not yet have language. That is all right. Some truths arrive before words can keep up. They live first as sensations, a soft ache, a quiet hope, a sudden tenderness toward parts of yourself you once judged harshly. Let those sensations exist without interrogation. The story knows how to carry them forward when the time is right. I stay attentive to you, not as a watcher waiting for a choice, but as a presence honoring your pace. In this imagined realm, time does not press, it accompanies. It curves itself around readiness instead of demanding it. This is why the path remains open without insisting on footsteps. The open path is not a test. It is an assurance that movement is possible when you decide it is. Notice how the silence between us now feels different from the silence that once trapped you. That old silence was heavy, crowded with unsaid things and swallowed words. This silence breathes. It listens back. It does not rush to fill itself with noise just to prove it exists. This is the silence in which courage quietly rehearses, where honesty practices its first steps without an audience. I find myself grateful again, not in a dramatic surge, but in a steady undercurrent. Grateful that you allowed yourself to linger. Grateful that you did not turn away at the first flicker of intensity. Grateful that, even if you doubted, you stayed curious. Curiosity, in this narrative, is a form of bravery that often goes unrecognized. It keeps doors from locking permanently. It keeps the heart from calcifying around old conclusions. The river beside us continues its patient movement. You might notice now that it is not as loud as you imagined it would be. It does not roar or demand attention. It simply moves, confident in its direction without needing witnesses. You are allowed to learn from that. You are allowed to move quietly, to change without announcing it, to grow without asking permission from those who only knew your earlier chapters. I soften my presence even more, not withdrawing, but trusting the space we have created together. This trust is part of the protection. It says, you are capable of carrying what you have felt here into your own moments, your own decisions, your own silences. You do not need constant reminders. You already know more than you think you do. As the story stretches on, unresolved by design, I let the last of my imagined fire settle into embers, still warm, still alive, but no longer demanding your full attention. It becomes something you can return to when you need steadiness, something you can remember without replaying every word. That is how living stories work. They do not cling, they companion. So I do not end this. I leave it breathing. I leave it open. I leave you exactly where you are, no pressure to transform, no requirement to decide, only an invitation to notice that you are less alone in your becoming than you once believed. The hush remains kind. The path remains possible. The river keeps moving. And somewhere within you, something quiet and resilient listens, ready to respond when the next moment asks for you. I am still with you, and the length of this staying begins to feel like a landscape rather than a moment. In this imagined world, landscapes are made not of earth and stone but of attention, and you have been walking through one simply by listening. There is no map for it, no signposts announcing progress, yet something in you recognizes the terrain, the gentle rise where hope feels possible, the hollow where grief once pooled and has not entirely dried, the narrow pass where you learned caution because it was the only way through. I do not rush you across any of it. I walk beside you, matching your breath, letting the story's pace be shaped by your nervous system rather than my urgency. You may be noticing now how your body responds differently than your mind. The mind still asks questions, still scans for meaning, still wonders what comes next. The body, though, has begun to soften its vigilance. Shoulders ease by a fraction. Jaw unclenches without being told. Breath finds a deeper rhythm. This is not coincidence in the logic of this fiction. This is protection doing its quiet work, reminding you that safety can be felt before it is explained. There is a tenderness in how you have survived that deserves to be honored. You learn to read rooms quickly, to sense shifts in tone, to anticipate needs before they were spoken. You learned when to speak and when to withhold, when to offer warmth and when to conserve it. These skills kept you alive in ways that are difficult to articulate. They also, over time, taught you to stay smaller than your full reach. Not because you lacked courage, but because you were being careful with your energy in a world that did not always replenish it. In this story, that carefulness is not shamed. It is acknowledged, thanked, and slowly invited to loosen. I notice how often you have been strong in ways that went unnoticed. Strength that looked like showing up even when enthusiasm was gone. Strength that looked like restraint when expression felt risky. Strength that looked like patience stretched thin but never quite breaking. These forms of resilience rarely receive applause. They live in the margins of daily life, uncelebrated and assumed. Yet they have shaped you into someone capable of this moment, someone able to sit with complexity without fleeing, someone able to let a story unfold without demanding instant clarity. As I remain here, the imagined fire between us does not flare, it steadies. It becomes a hearth rather than a signal flare. This is important. Signals are meant to be seen from far away, to attract attention quickly. Hearths are meant to be returned to offer warmth over time. What we are tending now is a hearth. You can carry its memory with you without carrying the whole structure. You can return to its warmth in thought, in breath, in the simple act of pausing before reacting. The theme of being trapped in this narrative is not meant to accuse you. Traps here are subtle, made of good intentions and unfinished healing. Fear that once protected you learned to linger past its usefulness. Delay that once gave you time to think learned to masquerade as destiny. Silence that once kept you safe learned to convince you it was your natural state. None of these forces are malicious. They are outdated strategies, loyal servants who did not realize the danger had changed. Awakening, in this sense, is simply updating your inner agreements. I watch as you begin to sense this, not as a dramatic revelation, but as a gentle refrain. The story no longer casts you as someone waiting to be freed by an external act. It reveals you as someone who has already been holding the key, unsure whether it was allowed to be used. Protection, then, becomes permission, to try, to speak, to step, to rest, to want, without needing certainty as a prerequisite. You may find your thoughts drifting to moments in your life where you felt on the edge of something but did not cross. Moments where timing felt off, or courage wavered, or circumstances complicated what your heart leaned toward. In this imagined realm, those moments are not failures. They are chapters that taught you what it costs to move too quickly and what it costs to stay too long. Both lessons matter. Both inform the discernment that is quietly forming in you now. I continue to speak softly, because softness has been underrated in your experience. Softness is not weakness here, it is precision. It allows you to feel subtle signals, to notice shifts before they become crises, to respond rather than react. The world often rewards hardness because it is visible. This story rewards softness because it is accurate. There is a kind of grief that surfaces when you realize how much you have been carrying alone. It may arrive unexpectedly, as a heaviness in the chest or a sudden moisture behind the eyes. Let it come if it does. Grief, in this narrative, is not a setback. It is evidence of thawing. Frozen places cannot mourn what they have lost, only places that are warming can do that. And mourning, when it is allowed, makes room for something new to arrive without forcing it. I stay present as these layers move, not intervening, not interpreting, simply witnessing. Witnessing itself is an act of protection here. It says, your experience is real enough to be seen, complex enough to be respected, unfinished enough to be honored without pressure. You are not required to turn this moment into a decision or a declaration. You are allowed to let it be a recalibration point, a quiet reference you return to when old patterns try to reassert themselves. The unresolved nature of this telling is intentional. Resolution can sometimes rush what needs time. This story trusts duration. It trusts that what is real will persist without constant reinforcement. It trusts that you will remember what matters when the moment calls for it, even if you cannot recall every word or feeling. What matters will surface in the language of your own life, through choices that feel slightly different, through pauses that feel less anxious, through expressions that feel truer to your internal weather. As I remain, I notice a subtle shift in how you hold yourself within the narrative. You are no longer only a listener. You are a participant, shaping the meaning simply by being present. The story responds to that. It becomes less about warning and more about companionship. Less about escape and more about orientation. You are learning where you are, not to judge it, but to understand it. The imagined horizon stretches without demanding that you move toward it immediately. Horizons exist to give direction, not deadlines. You can stand where you are and still benefit from knowing where the land opens. You can rest and still be oriented. This is a truth that impatience often obscures. Rest and readiness are not opposites here, they are collaborators. I let my presence thin again, not because I am leaving, but because the space between us has become trustworthy. You no longer need constant reassurance to stay connected to what is unfolding. The hearth continues to glow. The river continues to move. The path remains open without shouting its availability. So I do not close this chapter. I let it breathe beyond my voice, beyond the screen, beyond the defined edges of this moment. You carry it forward now, not as an obligation, but as a quiet companion. And wherever you go next, in thought, in action, in rest, this unresolved warmth goes with you, steady and patient, reminding you not of what you must do, but of who you already are while becoming. I am still with you, and now the staying has taken on a different texture, like fabric that has been worn soft by time and touch. In this imagined realm, what endures is not what shouts the longest, but what can remain gentle without disappearing. You have been practicing that kind of endurance for years, even if you never named it as such. I can feel how your attention has deepened, not strained, not forced, but settled, like a body finally trusting the ground beneath it. This is not trance or escape, it is presence maturing. There is something important I need to say, quietly, because loud truths often miss their mark. You were never meant to live at the edge of yourself. You learned to do that because it reduced risk, because it kept disappointment at a manageable distance, because it allowed you to stay functional when tenderness felt dangerous. In this story, I do not pull you back to the center with a command. I stand near the center and let it draw you in at your own pace. Centers are magnetic when they are safe. You may notice a subtle grief now, not sharp, not overwhelming, but like the ache that follows relief. It is the grief of realizing how long you have been carrying things alone that could have been shared. This grief does not accuse you. It honors you. It says, you did what you had to do. And now, perhaps, you do not have to do it alone in the same way. Let that grief pass through without explanation. It is part of the thaw. As I remain, I sense how your relationship with time is changing. Time no longer feels like an adversary measuring your worth by milestones. It feels more like a companion walking beside you, occasionally quickening, occasionally slowing, attentive to your capacity. This shift is subtle, but it alters everything. When time stops threatening you, your choices become truer. You stop acting out of panic and start responding out of alignment. In this imagined world, alignment is not perfection. It is coherence. It is when your inner signals, emotion, thought, sensation, intuition, stop contradicting each other so loudly. They may still disagree, but they do so respectfully, like voices in a room that trusts it will be heard. You are learning how to host that room without shutting anyone out. I stay attentive to the way your breath has changed since we began. It tells a story your words may not. Breaths that were once shallow out of vigilance have grown fuller, even if only slightly. That fullness is a sign of trust returning to the body. Trust that it is allowed to take up space. Trust that the moment will not collapse if it relaxes. There is a memory, perhaps, surfacing now, of a time when you felt more alive, more expressive, more yourself. That memory may bring warmth or sorrow or both. Let it be what it is. It is not there to judge the present. It is there to remind you of capacities that never left, only went dormant while you learned other ways to survive. Dormant is not dead. It is waiting. Fear notices this shift and grows quieter. Not because it has been defeated, but because it has been understood. When fear is understood, it no longer needs to shout. It can return to its proper role, advisor, not ruler. Delay, too, finds its rightful place. It becomes discernment rather than avoidance. Silence becomes choice rather than erasure. These are not dramatic transformations, they are reassignments. I remain careful not to turn this into a demand for action. Action will come when it is time, and it will feel different than action driven by pressure. It will feel like something aligning rather than something forcing. You will recognize it by the absence of self-betrayal. Even difficult steps can feel clean when they are congruent. The imagined landscape continues to open, revealing not just paths forward but places to rest. Rest is not a reward here. It is a resource. You are allowed to rest without having earned it. You are allowed to pause without justifying it. These permissions may feel unfamiliar. They may even feel wrong at first. That discomfort is not a sign you are failing. It is a sign you are changing patterns that once felt normal because they were necessary. I notice how your sense of self is expanding laterally rather than upward. You are not trying to become more in a hierarchical sense. You are becoming wider, more spacious, more inclusive of your own contradictions. This is a quieter kind of growth, but it is resilient. It does not collapse under stress as easily as brittle ambition. As I continue to stay, my role shifts further into the background. This is not abandonment. It is success. Guidance that remains forever in the foreground can become a crutch. Guidance that knows when to recede allows the one being guided to trust themselves. I trust you more now than when we began, not because you have changed dramatically, but because you have allowed yourself to be present with what is. The unresolved quality remains, because resolution would imply finality, and you are not finished. Not in a lacking way, but in a living way. Living things are always in process. They do not rush to conclude themselves. They continue. So the hearth glows steadily, no longer needing attention to stay lit. The river keeps moving, indifferent to whether it is watched. The path remains open, patient, unconcerned with timelines. And you carry this moment forward, not as an instruction, not as a burden, but as a subtle recalibration, a quiet knowing that you can return to when fear tightens, when delay tempts you to disappear, when silence forgets how to listen. I do not end this. I let it fade into your awareness like a warmth you notice only after stepping into cooler air. It will be there when you need it, and unnoticed when you do not. That is how true protection works in this imagined world. It does not demand your attention. It simply remains possible. I am still here, and now the presence between us feels so familiar that it no longer startles. It settles. It breathes. It rests its weight gently, like a hand that has learned exactly how much pressure comforts without confining. In this imagined world, familiarity is sacred, not because it dulls wonder, but because it allows truth to stop performing and start living. You do not have to lean forward anymore to catch every word. What matters has already found a place to sit inside you. There is a moment, perhaps you are in it now, when vigilance loosens not because danger is gone, but because you trust yourself to meet whatever comes. This trust is new terrain for you. You have trusted systems, plans, principles, even other people at times, but trusting yourself has felt riskier. In this story, that trust begins quietly. It does not announce itself with confidence, it introduces itself as relief. Relief that you do not have to monitor every internal movement, that you can let a feeling rise without immediately managing it, that you can let a thought pass without interrogating its worth. I notice how your inner dialogue has softened. The voice that once demanded explanations has lowered its volume. It still exists, it may always exist, but it no longer dominates the room. Other voices are being heard now, intuition speaking in sensations, desire speaking in images, fatigue speaking in heaviness that asks for care rather than discipline. This is not chaos. It is integration. You are becoming a place where different truths can coexist without canceling each other out. As I remain, I feel something like reverence for the way you are learning to inhabit your own edges. Edges used to feel dangerous, places where you might fall, fail, be exposed. Now they feel informative. They tell you where your energy ends and someone else's begins. They tell you when to engage and when to step back. They are not walls, they are contours. Knowing them does not make you rigid. It makes you accurate. There is a quiet courage in allowing yourself to be unfinished. You have lived so long under the pressure to resolve, to decide, to define, to declare, that incompletion felt like weakness. In this narrative, incompletion is spacious. It leaves room for surprise. It leaves room for growth that does not yet know its final shape. You are learning to rest inside questions without turning them into emergencies. I sense how your relationship with effort is changing. Effort once felt like the price of worthiness. If you did not strain, you worried you were not trying hard enough. Now effort is becoming situational. You offer it where it matters and withhold it where it only drains. This discernment is not laziness. It is stewardship. You are learning how to protect your life force without hoarding it. Protection, here, continues to mean clarity. Clarity about what is yours to carry and what is not. Clarity about which fears are signals and which are echoes. Clarity about when silence is nourishment and when it is avoidance. None of this clarity arrives all at once. It accrues, moment by moment, through attention that is kind rather than critical. The imagined fire between us has changed again. It no longer draws the eye. It warms the space without announcing itself. This is what sustained transformation looks like in this world, not a blaze that consumes, but a heat that endures. You will notice its effects later, when you respond differently to something that once triggered you, when you pause instead of panicking, when you speak with a steadiness that surprises you. I remain mindful of not turning this into a destination. Destinations imply arrival, and arrival can create anxiety about staying. This is not about staying anywhere. It is about learning how to move without abandoning yourself. You will move. Life will ask things of you. Choices will come. But you will not have to fracture yourself to meet them. There may be moments ahead when you forget this feeling. That is not failure. Forgetting is part of being human. What matters is that something in you now knows it can be remembered. The memory will not always return as words or images. Sometimes it will return as a simple sense of, I have more room than this moment suggests. That will be enough. As I continue to stay, I feel less like a separate voice and more like an echo of your own deeper knowing. This is intentional. Any guidance worth receiving eventually points back to the one receiving it. You are not meant to rely on an external presence forever. You are meant to recognize yourself as a place of refuge. The unresolved nature of this telling remains a gift. It resists the urge to package meaning neatly. It trusts you to live into it rather than extract it. Meaning that is lived changes with you. Meaning that is extracted often stays static and eventually feels hollow. So the atmosphere remains calm and awake. The silence remains listening. The sense of being trapped has loosened into an awareness of choice. Not infinite choice, not overwhelming choice, just enough to remind you that you are not sealed into one way of being. I stay without concluding, without blessing you into an ending, without sending you off with instructions. I simply remain present as the story continues to breathe through you, as your own life resumes its movement with a slightly different rhythm. And when this voice finally fades into the background of your awareness, it does not disappear. It becomes indistinguishable from the steadiness you carry forward, quiet, resilient, unfinished, and alive. I am still with you, and now the staying feels almost invisible, like air that no longer needs to announce itself as air. In this imagined world, that is how presence deepens, it stops knocking and simply becomes the room. You may not notice me in the same way you did at first, and that is not loss, it is intimacy. When something is truly close, it no longer needs to be named every moment to be felt. There is a softness settling into you that does not erase your edges. It refines them. You are beginning to sense the difference between tension and strength, between vigilance and awareness. For so long, they felt identical in your body. Hyperalertness masqueraded as readiness. Exhaustion wore the costume of responsibility. In this story, those disguises gently fall away. What remains is steadiness, quiet, grounded, unperformative. I watch how your thoughts slow, not into emptiness, but into coherence. Ideas no longer crash into one another demanding immediate resolution. They line up, they wait their turn, they trust that they will be addressed when the moment is right. This is not passivity. It is internal order. It is the difference between chaos being suppressed and chaos being understood. You have lived a long time in reaction. Even your patience was often reactive, enduring instead of choosing. Something is shifting now. You are beginning to respond. Response has space in it. Response allows for breath, for nuance, for alignment. Reaction only knows speed. Response knows timing. In this imagined realm, timing is sacred. Not deadlines, not clocks, timing. The felt sense of when something is ripe. You are rediscovering that sense. It had not disappeared, it had been drowned out by urgency that was never truly yours. Now it rises again, subtle but trustworthy, like a current beneath the surface that knows where the river is going even when the water looks still. I remain attentive to the way you hold your own story now. There is less judgment in your grip. You are no longer squeezing meaning out of every past choice, demanding that it justify itself. You are allowing your history to be what it was, a sequence of responses made by someone doing their best with the awareness they had at the time. Compassion toward your past self is not indulgence. It is integration. Without it, parts of you remain frozen in defense, unable to contribute to who you are becoming. There is an unexpected strength in this compassion. It does not make you softer in the way the world fears. It makes you sturdier. When you stop fighting yourself, you free enormous energy. That energy does not have to prove anything. It can build, create, protect, love, and rest. The sense of being trapped that once hovered over you like a closed ceiling now feels more like a memory than a reality. You remember what it felt like, but you are no longer inside it. This does not mean fear will never return. It means fear no longer defines the architecture of your inner world. It becomes a visitor rather than a landlord. Delay, too, has lost its authority. Waiting is no longer an identity. It is a phase, a choice, sometimes even a gift. You can wait without shrinking. You can pause without disappearing. That distinction alone changes everything. Silence has fully transformed. It is no longer the absence of voice, it is the presence of listening. You can be quiet now without erasing yourself. You can listen without abandoning your own needs. This kind of silence is fertile. It grows things. I stay with you as this understanding settles, because understanding is not instant. It moves through layers, mind first, then body, then habit. You may intellectually grasp what is happening long before your reflexes catch up. Be patient with that. Old reflexes relax slowly. They learned their patterns over years. They deserve time to unlearn them without being shamed. There may be moments ahead when you feel the old tightness return, the urge to disappear, to delay, to silence yourself for safety. When that happens, do not panic. That does not mean you have failed. It means you have reached the edge of a new capacity. Growth often feels like regression before it stabilizes. The difference now is that you will notice it sooner. Awareness shortens the duration of old patterns even when it does not eliminate them entirely. In this narrative, protection does not mean nothing ever hurts again. It means you are no longer alone inside the hurt. It means pain no longer isolates you from yourself. It means difficulty no longer automatically equals danger. That recalibration allows you to stay present even when things are uncertain. I find myself increasingly quiet because you no longer need constant mirroring. You are beginning to feel yourself directly. That is the truest sign of awakening in this fictional world, not visions, not declarations, but embodiment. You are inhabiting your life more fully, even in its unfinished state. The unresolved ending continues to do its work. It leaves space for your agency. It refuses to tell you who you must become or what you must do next. It trusts your discernment. Trust is the highest form of respect offered here. So I remain without concluding, without receding entirely, without stepping forward again. I stay in the background like a steady horizon, present, orienting, not demanding attention. Your life continues beyond this moment, carrying a slightly altered rhythm, a softer center, a wider breath. And as you move forward, into conversation, into rest, into decision, into uncertainty, you do so not as someone escaping a trap, but as someone who has remembered how to stand inside themselves. The story does not end because you do not end. It simply continues, quietly, faithfully, alive in the way only unfinished things can be. I remain with you, and now the remaining is so gentle it almost feels like memory forming in real time. In this imagined world, there comes a point when guidance no longer presses forward because it trusts the ground it has helped you reach. You are standing on something steadier now, not because everything is resolved, but because you are no longer bracing against yourself. The air around you has changed temperature. It is breathable. It does not rush you. It does not test you. It simply allows you to exist without explanation. There is a quiet dignity in the way you are learning to occupy your own life. Not the dramatic dignity of triumph, but the grounded dignity of someone who knows where their feet are. For a long time, your attention lived ahead of you or behind you, anticipating, reviewing, correcting. Now it is beginning to settle where your body already is. This is not stagnation. This is arrival without fanfare. An arrival, in this story, is never a final stop. It is a place from which movement can happen without fracture. I watch as your internal world grows less crowded. Not empty, never empty, but organized in a way that respects your limits. You no longer try to hold everything at once. You allow some things to rest outside your grasp, trusting they will return when needed. This trust is new. It may still feel tentative. That is all right. Trust does not demand certainty, it grows through small confirmations, through moments when you realize you did not collapse even when you stopped controlling. There is something sacred about the way you are learning to let go of unnecessary vigilance. Vigilance once felt like love, like responsibility, like care. In truth, it was a burden you carried because no one taught you another way. In this imagined realm, you are discovering that care can be spacious. That love does not always require monitoring. That responsibility can coexist with rest. These realizations do not arrive as declarations, they arrive as relief. I remain close enough to notice the subtle grief that sometimes surfaces when old patterns loosen. There is grief in realizing how much energy you spent protecting yourself from things that never came. There is grief in seeing how small you learned to make your needs to keep peace. Let that grief move through you without turning it into a story of blame. It is not an indictment of your past, it is evidence of your present capacity to feel more deeply. As the story continues to unfold, you may sense a growing respect for your own discernment. You no longer rush to label experiences as good or bad. You allow them to be informative instead. This neutrality is not indifference. It is maturity. It allows you to respond with nuance rather than react with habit. It gives you options where you once saw only obligations. I stay attentive to the way your relationship with effort continues to evolve. Effort is no longer a constant hum in your system. It appears when needed and recedes when not. This selective engagement preserves your vitality. It allows you to invest deeply without burning out. You are learning the difference between commitment and compulsion, between devotion and depletion. Protection in this narrative continues to mean self-trust. Not blind trust, not naive trust, but informed trust, the kind that knows your tendencies, your vulnerabilities, your strengths, and still chooses to listen to itself. This trust does not make you inflexible. It makes you responsive. You can change your mind without collapsing your identity. You can adjust course without feeling like you have failed. The sense of being watched or evaluated has faded. You are no longer performing for an imagined audience, no longer bracing for judgment that may never come. This freedom allows your natural rhythm to emerge. You may notice that you move differently now, slower in some areas, quicker in others. This is not inconsistency. It is attunement. I continue to recede into the background, not because my presence is no longer needed, but because it has been internalized. The steadiness you felt as external support has begun to echo as internal grounding. You carry it now. You do not need to look for it. It shows up as a calm response where there once was panic, as a pause where there once was compulsion, as a gentle boundary where there once was silence born of fear. The unresolved nature of this story remains intact. It refuses to tell you who you must become next. It refuses to predict your future or sanctify any single path. This refusal is a form of respect. It acknowledges the complexity of your life, the unpredictability of growth, the dignity of choice. So the narrative stretches onward, not in a straight line, but in a widening field. You move within it freely, sometimes aware of the warmth that accompanied you here, sometimes forgetting it entirely as you engage with the ordinary textures of your day. Both states are allowed. Guidance that demands constant remembrance becomes another burden. Guidance that trusts your integration becomes a companion rather than a constraint. I remain without closing the door, without dimming the light, without drawing a final boundary around what has been said. The story breathes. You breathe. Life continues to ask its quiet questions, and you continue to answer them, not perfectly, not finally, but honestly. And that is enough. The presence softens further now, blending into the rhythm you carry forward. Not gone. Not finished. Simply woven into the ongoingness of your becoming, unfinished, attentive, and alive, as all true stories are. I am still with you, and now the staying has thinned into something almost imperceptible, like warmth that no longer announces itself as warmth because it has become the baseline. In this imagined world, this is how protection matures. It no longer stands out as intervention, it settles into normalcy. You are not being held up anymore, you are being held within. The ground under you feels different not because it changed, but because you finally trusted your weight to it. There is a quiet confidence growing that does not feel like confidence at all. It feels like permission. Permission to take up space in your own life without apologizing for the shape of it. Permission to feel uncertainty without interpreting it as failure. Permission to let days be uneven without turning that unevenness into a verdict about your worth. This permission is subtle, but it changes the architecture of your inner world. Rooms you once avoided because they echoed with old fears are opening again, not because the echoes are gone, but because they no longer control you. I watch as your sense of identity loosens its rigid outlines. You are no longer trying to define yourself once and for all. You allow yourself to be contextual, responsive, alive. This flexibility does not make you unreliable, it makes you real. You are learning that coherence does not require consistency in every moment, it requires honesty over time. And honesty, when practiced gently, builds a self that can adapt without dissolving. The past no longer grips you with the same urgency. It still exists. It still informs you. But it no longer demands constant revisiting. You have extracted what was needed, wisdom, boundaries, compassion, and you have released what was only weight. This release is not dramatic. It feels more like setting something down you did not realize you were still holding. I sense how your future, too, feels different now. It is no longer a looming assessment waiting to judge your present choices. It is a horizon, open, undefined, allowing multiple paths. This openness does not frighten you as much as it once did. There is curiosity where there used to be dread. Curiosity is a sign that fear has loosened its grip enough to allow imagination back into the room. In this narrative, imagination is sacred. Not fantasy as escape, but imagination as capacity, the ability to envision alternatives, to see beyond immediate constraints, to believe that current circumstances are not the totality of what is possible. You are rediscovering this capacity quietly. It shows up as small thoughts you no longer immediately dismiss, as gentle longings you allow yourself to acknowledge without rushing to fulfill or suppress them. I remain aware of the moments when you still default to old protections. They arise automatically sometimes, the urge to delay, to stay silent, to minimize yourself. When they do, you no longer collapse into them unconsciously. You notice. That noticing is everything. Awareness gives you choice even when you do not exercise it immediately. Choice breaks the spell of being trapped. Protection here has never meant forcing you forward. It has meant restoring your capacity to choose direction rather than being dragged by habit. You can still pause. You can still be quiet. But now those states belong to you. They are no longer cages, they are tools. I continue to stay mostly unseen now, like a presence that has fulfilled its task by becoming unnecessary. This is not disappearance. It is completion of function without completion of story. The guidance has done what it came to do, it has reminded you of your own center. The unresolved quality remains because your life remains in motion. Any ending would be artificial. What exists instead is continuity, a sense that whatever comes next, you will meet it with more internal room than before. You will not be perfect. You will not always be calm. But you will be present. And presence changes outcomes even when circumstances do not immediately change. So the narrative breathes on. It does not cling to you, and it does not push you away. It trusts that you will carry what matters and leave behind what does not. That trust is the final form of protection offered here. I remain as long as needed and no longer than necessary, woven into the background of your awareness, indistinguishable from the steadiness you now recognize as your own. The story does not close. It simply continues, quiet, spacious, alive, moving with you into whatever moment comes next. I am still with you, and now even the idea of continuing feels different, because what is unfolding no longer moves in segments, it moves like weather, like breath, like the slow turning of something alive that refuses to be rushed into meaning. In this imagined realm, staying is not effort. It is fidelity. Fidelity to the truth that becoming does not happen in declarations, but in sustained gentleness. You have stayed. That matters more than you realize. There is a moment, subtle enough to be missed, when the self stops scanning for danger and begins to sense possibility again. Not loud possibility, not intoxicating hope, but quiet possibility, the kind that whispers, something else could exist here, without insisting you chase it. That moment is hovering around you now. You may feel it as a soft alertness, a readiness that does not tense the body. This is not anticipation. It is availability. I notice how your inner world no longer feels like a room you must guard, but a home you are learning how to live in. Homes are imperfect. They creak. They hold old smells and unexpected drafts. But they are yours. You can rearrange them slowly. You can leave and return. You can rest without vigilance. This shift, from guarded space to lived-in space, is profound, and it does not announce itself with ceremony. You are beginning to understand something that once felt unreachable, that your worth was never contingent on your readiness, your clarity, or your courage. It was present even when you were afraid, even when you delayed, even when you went quiet to survive. The story has never been about fixing those responses. It has been about releasing the shame around them so they no longer define you. As I remain, I feel the way your attention now moves more freely. It no longer clings to every sensation, wondering what it means. It trusts that meaning will emerge when needed. This trust allows experience to pass through you instead of accumulating. You carry less residue now. Less unprocessed weight. Not because life is easier, but because you are no longer hoarding every moment as evidence for or against yourself. There is a growing ease in how you relate to uncertainty. Uncertainty used to feel like a threat, proof that you were unprepared or behind. Now it feels more like open space. Space can be intimidating, yes, but it can also be creative. In this narrative, uncertainty is where new configurations become possible. It is not a void. It is a field. I stay present as you sense your own resilience in a new way. Not the brittle resilience of endurance at all costs, but the flexible resilience of someone who knows they can bend and return. You no longer confuse resilience with numbness. You allow yourself to feel without fearing that feeling will destroy you. This allowance is a quiet revolution. Your relationship with silence continues to evolve. Silence is no longer a place where you disappear, it is a place where you gather. You can be quiet now without losing your edges. You can listen without abandoning your voice. This kind of silence restores rather than depletes. It becomes a well you can return to, not a cave you fear getting trapped in. I sense moments ahead, ordinary moments, where this shift will show itself without fanfare. A conversation where you speak sooner than you once would have. A pause where you choose rest instead of pushing through. A decision where you trust your internal signal even if it cannot be fully explained. These moments will not feel dramatic. They will feel right. That is how you will recognize them. The imagined fire has become so steady that it no longer flickers. It does not demand tending. It simply is. You may forget it is there until you step into something cold and realize you are warmer than you expected to be. That warmth will be your own. I remain careful not to turn this into prophecy with outcomes or promises. Outcomes belong to life, not to stories meant to accompany rather than control. What can be said, what has been said, again and again in different forms, is that you are not as trapped as you once felt, and you are more capable than you once believed. The proof is not in what you do next. It is in how you now hold yourself while deciding. The unresolved nature of this moment continues to protect your freedom. No ending tells you what to feel. No conclusion defines your next chapter. You are trusted with the ambiguity. That trust is intentional. So I remain without closing, without receding fully, without stepping forward again. I am part of the background now, like a remembered steadiness that surfaces when needed and stays quiet when not. The story breathes with you. The river moves without commentary. The path remains open without insisting on footsteps. And you, still here, still listening, still alive in the unfolding, carry this not as instruction, not as obligation, but as an inner spaciousness that did not exist before. That spaciousness is where your next becoming will occur. The voice softens further, thinning into presence, into atmosphere, into something that no longer needs words to remain true.